What's up, geniuses? Welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Rob Markman. We are still at home. We are still practicing safe and social distancing, but there's still things to talk about in music and in culture. And last week, okay, we saw footage of Doja Cat reportedly in these racist and alt-right tiny chat rooms that surfaced online. In addition, a bunch of internet sleuths unearthed old Doja Cat songs, particularly one from 2015 called Didn't Do Nothing, which has been accused. People think it's about her making light of victims of police brutality. All right. She since apologized in a written statement with her and her team on Instagram. And then she aimed to clarify herself on IG Live. In times like this, I think a lot of things happen on social media. There's a lot of memes. I want to separate the facts from the memes and talk to the people who I really kind of trust with this topic, and where I think at the end we could have some real understanding about what's going on and where do we go from here. So we got a great panel. First up, we have culture writer EVA Ani. She has some of the best, most interesting and thought-provoking takes on social media. I love reading her writing. She's written for Teen Vogue and OK Player. And it's her birthday week. And she got the fly Yankee bucket on. EVA, welcome to For the Record again.
Thank you for having me again.
Nah, of course, man. I love it. Next up, we have music writer Kiana Fitzgerald. You've seen her work in Complex, Vibe, and Rolling Stone. Also, no stranger to the show. Thank you for joining us, Kiana.
Happy to be here.
Dope. It's not your birthday week, too, is it?
No, not till August.
Okay, so we're going to have you back on in August. We're going to have a big celebration. And finally, we have HuffPo Black Voices editor, Taryn Finley. I mean, you covered everything from the significance of black hair to women in hip hop and everything in between. So I love to read your writing. I love to have your opinion on the show. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No doubt. I mean, let's just get into it. When we first started hearing the news about Doja Cat, this isn't the first time that she's been engaged in like an online controversy stemming from problematic behavior. In 2018, some of her past homophobic tweets have resurfaced online. What did you just think when this news just started popping up of the tiny chat rooms? The mingling with alt right and racist users in tiny chat reportedly. This didn't do nothing. Taryn, let's start with you. What did you just first start thinking about when this news started surfacing?
Initially, I didn't even want to engage. Honestly, it's too much going on already. We've had the deaths of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so many others. And so I just really didn't even feel like I had the emotional capacity to even do so initially. But when I dove into it, I realized that it was like before we were talking about, there were a lot of memes, there were a lot of jokes, there was a lot of rumors and speculations about what happened and what didn't. And I think the most disturbing part for me was the song Didn't Do Nothing. Especially because I know that she recorded it in 2015. She was 19 then, but it feels very much like horrible timing for it to come out right now, just from an emotional standpoint where Black people just all around don't feel safe, not only because of the violence that we're facing, by the state and by white supremacy, but also by COVID-19. We have to deal with this during a pandemic. So that on top of, her allegedly mingling in these chats with white supremacists. I know we haven't we know that Tiny Chat is a breeding ground for incels. And we know that she said that she's been, kind of in these chats, whether or not, she did everything that she was rumored to be doing is another conversation. But the two going hand in hand right now, it just makes her look really funny in the light. It honestly is very disappointing for me.
EVA, man, let's go to you. What were your first thoughts? And man, Taryn, I think you make a dope point about the timing of this too. But I want to go to EVA and because there's a lot going on in the world, and though we're discussing this, I mean, I have CNN on right now. It's just
it's a lot.
Horrific.
It's a lot to
horrific.
It's a lot to take in. But I do think that unfortunately we've been programmed to deal with more than one thing at a time. So I do think people were processing this Doja Cat news alongside all of this other news. And in tandem, it is really disappointing that a song like that would resurface at a time like this, that a situation like that, in terms of her engaging with white supremacists and this whole subset of internet culture, which I think is really, really important to talk about, especially because of her age. Doja Cat is 24, I believe. So I believe she's in the Generation Z category. So that's a whole generation of young people who literally grew up on the internet. And there is a subculture of the internet in which these conversations and these chat rooms take place. And Doja Cat, for example, has spoken about how she's been online since she was a child. She's been in these chat rooms since she was a teenager. She dropped out of school and spent all this time in these chat rooms. And that speaks to how much of her identity was formed on the internet and in spaces where it probably didn't benefit her to be in. And I saw a separate conversation happening online about how young Black kids can sometimes get swept into these spaces unknowingly, and then they make the decision to leave, or they don't understand where they are. So there's a whole other conversation happening in terms of that, her generation, what the internet means for a subset of people growing up during this time. And that, coupled with all of Doja Cat's other identity, quote unquote, identity issues, I think people were trying to make sense of that in terms of her not necessarily relating to her Blackness, in terms of her talking about being distanced from her father and her South African side, her Black side, in terms of her talking about her hair and her skin and all these different things. There's so many different elements. But when I first heard it, I didn't process it as something immediate that I should be concerned about because of all these other things. But I immediately thought about how, men in hip hop have made similar transgressions and worse. And what has come from that? And also the timing of, I know people like to bring up the timing of when someone makes a successful feat during their career. All of this negative commentary and all of this hyper critique is aimed at them, but that comes with the territory. If you're in the limelight at a certain period, all of what you do is in the limelight. So there's so much for people to pull from. So she did get a number one. There's many eyes and ears on her now. People are doing a little bit more research on her now. But I think that also speaks to this issue in particular with women, especially women in rap, when we take them up and then we take them down really, really fast. And there's no grace. There's no grace period. As quick as we prop them up is as quick as we take them down. And that's an issue in itself as well.
Right. No, that you made some amazing points and some things that I really want to come back to. One for I look at intent a lot, right? And you make a good point. You make several good points, but you make a good point about the timing of this and her success, and then people what they call on the internet doxing, right? Where you start going into somebody's past and digging up stuff. Um, and it came after she got the number one. It came after she jokingly promised to show her boobs if she got the number one, and then when she got the number one, she said, "Guys, I was just kidding." And there was definitely a section of the internet that felt entitled to see her body, right, which was weird. Um, it came after the Lana Del Rey Instagram post where she was mentioned and she responded to, and then there was kind of a back and forth with some barbs. Like these are all like also products of stan culture and really what you said, a generation who was raised on the internet. So was a lot of this stuff from Doja's past uncovered to get to the conversation and get to the truth, or was it uncovered to hurt her? And I think the intent, the reality is the reality, and you can't escape that. But you have to also factor in the intent. Who uncovered this stuff? Why did they uncover this stuff? Why was it positioned? What was the timing of it? And how is this conversation being framed? Also affects how people react to it. I feel personally, Um, wow, that was a lot though. Keanu, I want to get to you also and give you a chance to just kind of unpack what your initial thoughts was and what your initial feelings were.
Yeah, I mean, these two ladies have already really touched on a lot of how I felt. But in general, when things started to kind of creep out slowly one by one, and I was keeping up with Twitter and seeing just how people were reacting to it, my initial thought was, here we go again. You know, like like you said before, she's already had a brush with cancellation, quote unquote. And it was really just my initial gut feeling was disappointment. I wasn't shocked because she unfortunately has had some issues in the past with how she expresses herself online, but that still didn't take away from the fact that there were things that were hurtful about what was initially coming out. And then, of course, I started to learn, as we said before, some of those things are not true, some of those are half truths. What is really true at this point is still up in the air. It's only been a few days or a week or so. So I think we're still getting to the bottom of what is actually the truth. But for me, it was just tough because I am someone, you know, I'm from the South, I'm from Texas. I've had many an issue with white supremacy here, with issues that involve my identity, my color, my gender, everything like that. So to see someone who did ascend to a status of having a number one, someone who does have a lot of visibility and a lot of impact on a lot of young black girls, her making those kinds of decisions at this point in her career when she does have a lot of eyes and ears on her, I just felt like it was really silly. I know that there was one instance I was pointing out in which she was in a tiny chat the same day that she was on an IG live, and it was like a week prior. And there's nothing wrong with her engaging in the spaces that she wants to engage in, but she does have to be more responsible because she's incredibly famous at this point. You can't turn on the radio, you can't go on Twitter, you can't go on IG without someone talking about her or seeing a clip of her or something. So at this point, I just maintain that, you know, she is 24, she is young, but hopefully her team is helping her to acknowledge that there is a level of responsibility that comes with her career at this point.
And accountability. No, I think that's a great point. And it's so funny how quick and heartbreaking, even almost how quick it was. An exciting conversation when we were talking about four black women being in contention for the number one record on Billboard between Doja and Nicki and their collaboration, and Meg The Stallion and Beyonce and their collaboration. And they actually both ascended to number one in different weeks, which was amazing. And I remember the social chatter being this excitement, like, yo, we have four black women in contention. Like, yes, this is what it's been. And now the charts are actually reflecting black women's contribution to hip hop and music and culture overall. Like, let's celebrate this. And how quickly we went from that to down this hole that we went to. It felt deflating, from a cultural level. What, Kiana makes a good point about, accountability. Like, you know, she apologized. She said the initial Instagram post that she did was crafted by her and her team. But she wanted to get on IG Live and to explain herself and do it in the way that she's always done, and that felt true and authentic to her and the fans that came up with her. What do we think of the IG Live apology explanation? She came with bullet points. She kind of addressed everything one by one through her own eyes. I mean, what did that feel like to you, Evia?
That to me spoke to how artists, especially artists of her generation, and just artists in general now, kind of circumvent the press in that way and tend to use social media or whatever platforms that they have in a singular way to speak directly to their audiences, to communicate directly with their audiences. And I've seen other public figures do the same. They'll have a drafted up PR statement and then they'll kind of refute that and then literally go on live and say whatever they want to say. But I think they should also be cognizant of the fact that them being on live, speaking directly to their audience, does not make that conversation insulated, and it will be public. So whatever comfortability that they have in that space and speaking in that space to their audience, I'm not sure if they're thinking about how big that would be and how public that would be. But it made me think about artists circumventing press and that conversation. And also, again, this is how she grew up. That's how she directly communicates in general, it seems. There's a whole generation of people who communicate via the internet, via social media. And it seems that she's most comfortable on the internet. And I think that I I personally think that she's still reckoning with what comes with fame and celebrity, because celebrity culture in 2020 is different than celebrity culture in 1980. You can be famous online and never step foot outside, and never go to a meet and greet, never go to do a show, never have to be in front of an audience. So I think there's that element of being on the internet 24/7 and engaging in a way that's different from the real world, that has this effect on the way artists communicate with their fans and the way they handle apologies and the way they handle any transgression that they make. So that's what I thought when she went on live, and she did seem to tackle a lot of issues that were coming up. And she debunked a few things and fact checked a few things. But also, her apology on live was still critiqued as well. And people found fault in that as well. But it's just very interesting to see all the vitriol be aimed at her. And very interesting to see someone like Dr. Luke, who worked on her #1 record and who also has rape and sexual assault allegations, virtually silent,
And
and the conversation is redirected there.
yeah, and dodges all criticism for, it's under a pseudonym, another name that he's producing under, and most people are either don't notice or don't care. So no, I think you make a good point. Um, Taryn, the IG live, what did you take from it? Because I, I'm not gonna lie, when I saw my first interaction with her IG live was the clips that were cut up and then spread on social media, and I'm like, oh my god, like this is a mess. And then when I actually watched the whole thing and sat down and watched it, to me, it wasn't as bad as the memes made it seem. It wasn't as bad as the highlights that people cut out to fit whatever narrative they wanted. And in a lot of ways, I agree with EVA is that, oh, this is how, if you've been following her, this is how she addresses things. This is how she interacts with her audience. And it didn't seem to me as bad as the memes. But what did you take away from it when you saw the IG live?
Yeah, and I relate because I did first see the lives or some of her sound bites broken up, but when I watched it all the way through, it was like, okay, this is just like a standard like Doja Cat live. I've watched her on live before. She usually, talks in these like very disjointed, like she has I guess you could say a style, when she does these lives. And the apology was in that style of her, going down her, using her, like, not even using, but employing, her edgy identity, like that she was trying to, not even trying, because I think the intention was there to be real and to be authentic. She said that she had recorded videos trying to do this rehearsed thing initially, but it didn't feel right. So let me turn to live. I think EVA made a really good point with that, because that's just what is authentic to her. Now, as far as like what she was saying, I appreciated the bullet points and her trying to set the record straight on certain things. Do I necessarily think that she fully understands the gravity of a lot of the things that people are saying that they're hurt by? No. I think that there's room right here, and I do believe that we should be giving her grace. I do believe that there is this huge, huge, layer of misogyny that I don't think that we've really addressed when we talk about Doja Cat and should she be canceled and all of that. But she is very young, and from what it seems from the live and just from knowing her history, she is out of touch with certain parts of blackness. It feels very much like she is lost. Like, it really saddens me that she found solace specifically, because like I know a lot of people, like, a lot of us have found solace, be it on Twitter or Instagram or in these different online communities, but it really, saddened me that she didn't like go in deeper, as far as like why she found solace in these chats. Because I looked into the chats and watched some of the videos, and some of the aftermath, and they're like, "Oh, well, I'm not racist. This isn't a racist chat." Well, I don't know many races that are going to admit they're racist, to be honest. Um, I say all that to say about her live. I think that, it was a first step. I'm not going to say if it's a good first step or a bad first step. It was a first step that felt authentic to her and how we know her brand. But I do think with her turning off the comments in the live, I do think with her not necessarily like further engaging now, I don't know if, like EVA said, if she's still trying to like process and grapple with everything that's going on and this side of fame. Um, but I would love to see an engagement component, and because I think that that is where you truly start to learn as an artist, especially if you're, cutting off certain lanes of communication from press or whatever. I think that that is one way that you learn about your missteps, is really engaging with the fan base that's been loyal to you.
Mhm. And listening to people, right? Talking
Right.
and listening is the other important part, figuring out where the hurt came from. There was some things that I relate to. EVA had brought up her being mixed race, like I myself am mixed, and there are periods, and I think you experience, you know, blackness in America is painful, as we see when we turn on the news anyway. It's filled with pain, and but also the pain of not knowing, or having, or feeling like you have to choose, or feeling like I'm not one, I'm not the other, and then there's different times and spaces where I'm comfortable here but I'm not comfortable here, and that may be part of it. And then the other really important part is the generational thing of part of, she's incredibly talented. Like I think you cannot deny that, right? And then I think her talent, coupled with the way that she is a child of the internet, that she knows how to use the internet, that she knows how to position her music and her art in ways to grab attention, and get the mass amount of people to listen and pay attention. Like, they all go hand in hand. So it's almost like, and then the same thing that makes you laugh makes you cry. Well, why does she know how to use the internet real well? Because she's in it, like, deep. You know what I'm saying? And there's good and bad that can come from that. Um, let Vulture wrote a story, and not that I go around quoting Vulture a whole lot, but the headline was interesting. It was actually, the story was actually just a timeline of what happened and how we got here, right? And but the headline read, Doja Cat's controversial career from overnight star to canceled overnight. And that headline alone was interesting to me. And we kind of touched on it, and I'll go around the horn. Is she canceled? And is anybody ever truly really canceled? I feel like we throw that around, and does that work?
She's clearly not canceled. She still has a strong fan base. As soon as she made her apology, even before she made her apology, there are people coming to her defense. There are people wanting to understand the deeper elements to why she did what she did. She's not canceled. Nobody ever gets canceled. And if people did get canceled, we wouldn't have all these men who've done heinous things in the past, still making money, still touring, still, succeeding, still on the charts, still producing number one records. Nobody gets canceled. But I think that speaks to the conversation that I mentioned before about how quickly we prop people up and how quickly we take them down, and why that's an unhealthy way to produce stardom, I would say, especially for women, especially for young women. Because where is the middle ground? Where is the middle ground to assess where you've come from and where you are now? I don't think Doja Cat had a period of assessing the level of fame that she ascended to.
Mhm.
And, it's been packaged as she's this overnight success story, especially when Moo came out. She's not an overnight success story. She had a whole catalog before Moo came out. She had a strong fan base before Moo came out. She just expanded to a different level of stardom. And I think people need to recognize how much of fame right now for musicians is based off this concept of micro communities. So someone can have millions of followers and none of us can know who they are, but they're still successful within that micro community. So someone like her may have been transitioning from that to kind of national and global stardom and never processed it because she never had to leave her laptop or her phone or what have you. So there's that element. And she's not canceled. I'll just say that. We have this conversation so many times about cancel culture. She's not canceled.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think at this point, you know, it's 2020. We've been talking about cancel culture for a few years now. If we really looked at all the people who were brought up in those conversations, how many of them were actually canceled, aside from the major figures like a Harvey Weinstein or an R. Kelly who are actually like facing or in jail or prison? The people who are canceled, quote unquote, have a rough couple of weeks and then their fans rally and then they get right back on the charts or they get right back on IG and they're like, you know, popping off and saying whatever they want to say. There, as EVA pointed out, there are tons of men who have done incredibly terrible things, and we still see them on playlists shared by some of the biggest stars in the world. We still see them, you know, having their chance at opportunities that people who have been grinding for years and people who are genuinely good people will never get a chance to see because they've been there or because their fans are rabid or what have you. Like, we have a Kanye West who has done and said a whole bunch of stuff at this point. And, you know, for example, I went to his listening session for Jesus is King last October. And people that I know personally, people that I follow online, nobody messes with Kanye at this point. But there were fans upon fans buying merch, supporting, screaming, doing this, doing that. People who couldn't be more excited to see him in person. They are still there and they're still going to be there. And to bring it back to Doja Cat, I watched the IG Live on YouTube. It was like, you know, archived there. And I just scrolled down to the comments, which I usually don't do. But I was like, you know what? Let me just see what's there. And literally, I read maybe like 50 comments. And every single person was like, I still stand. I support her. She made a mistake. People are taking this too seriously. Twitter is a cesspool, which I agree to a certain extent. But for the most part, people are still going to be there and they're still going to support the people that make their bops, the people that feel like they connect to whatever. Those people are always going to be around.
And no, you make great points, and especially about cancel culture and men. And I'm of the opinion of R. Kelly canceled, but it was also how convenient because he wasn't making hits anymore either.
Mm.
You know, it made it easier to get him out the paint, or Bill Cosby. You know, obviously, and and not to bring Doja Cat and R. Kelly in the same conversation because these were actual crimes that were tried in court with actual real victims. You know,
Yeah.
versus maybe an ideology, a thought, a song. You know, misplaced thought, misplaced intent. Two worlds, different things, but you know, we go cancel only becomes real when we don't need you anymore. Anyway,
Hmm.
like I just don't know what's real in America. If we could still profit off of you, if you could still make a bop or a song that we like, 9 out of 10 times, 9.5 out of 10 times, all things will be forgiven eventually if a hit song comes behind it.
I think that's an
Um,
interesting point, especially because if we look at who Doja Cat's audience is, I would say she has a large white audience at this point who may not be as concerned as we are, or as concerned as some of her fans are, or as concerned as some of her critics are with this particular subject matter. So they're neither here nor there. And I think that she may have a connection to them in this sense of that generation of people who kind of came to form when blackness was the default of pop culture. So anything you see on the internet is a derivative of blackness or is a black cultural production. So if Doja Cat is, you know, biracial and detached from her black side, she may have very well learned about blackness through pop culture the same as these white kids did, you know,
right.
if she didn't have black people around her. So they may have a connection in that way where they're not going to disown her or cancel her over this because they may not be that concerned to begin with.
Right. Yeah. No. And I feel that, and we see it all the time. I think now that we have the numbers to back up that you know when we talk about hip hop specifically, but really black music, the most popular. You know, you go on Spotify and you'll see how popular a song is before you even know how it sounds. Or you go on YouTube, you see how many views. The data now backs up what we've known all along about hip hop music, the biggest, most influential music in the world. With that comes a lot of fans on the fringe. You know, they like it because it's what's hot, but because everything is so revolved around clicks, it becomes democratic. So whoever gets the most clicks is king. And but who's giving those clicks, right? Like what are their values? And you know, you see that with the Takashi situation.
Mm.
Like, you know, hip hop is against it. Like, for the most part, people are pissed and upset, but somebody's clicking it. For a lot of people, they don't care. They don't hold the same values as street people. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's a very similar thing of what you're talking about here. The value system is different, so it's not as important to you. Taryn, any closing thoughts? You know, like, this has been a tremendously. I love this discussion, man, because Twitter could be stressful sometimes, and also, and one thing I just want to say, and I do want to go to you, is I understand it. I think some of this, especially on Twitter and social media, is misplaced. Obviously, we talked about the fan armies, but I think a very important thing also is people are also frustrated, and black people in particular are frustrated again, because when you turn on the news and you see Ahmaud Arbery, you see Breonna Taylor, you see George Floyd, like, you see blackness under constant attack every time you turn on the radio, turn on the TV, man, it gets to you. And then you see some shit like this, and it's like, man, fuck out of here. Like,
Hmm.
we're done. So that outrage is while, you know, we're here, I think, to separate, like I said, the fact from the memes. Some of that outrage is real. Those feelings are real feelings of frustration based off of everything that's going on in the world. From my perspective, at least. But Taryn, I wanted to go to you and just get your thoughts before we wrap.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's so much going on right now. We are consistently under attack in an unsafe place in a regular time period, but especially like during a pandemic, it feels especially hard for a lot of people. For a lot of people on my timeline, for a lot of my friends. I'm really hoping that we get to a point where we do see some kind of light at the end of the tunnel, and that we do see that, Doja specifically, um, starts to learn and starts to understand. I mean, I saw that she tweeted out petitions and GoFundmes for some of the victims this week. And I don't think she's canceled. I don't think she's canceled. I don't think she should be. However, I do think that if there are people, especially black people, who are, hurt by what she said, hurt by what she's done, and don't feel like they can rock with her anymore, or have to like give her some time to breathe, like, I think that's okay. You know, that's okay. But I'm glad that we're having conversations like these where we can separate the fact and make sure that, we go into the layers, because not only is cancel culture a lot of times, like, not only is that misused, and a lot of people like just don't even understand exactly like what it is if it comes into play, etc. But I also think that, like, we have room to be mad, we have room to hold people accountable, we also should have the grace, like our artists, especially our black women artists, because I saw some things talking about, oh, Doja's a white woman. No, she's not. She's a black woman. Like, let's get that straight first and foremost. Black women artists should have the room in hip hop to have that grace to, all right, I messed up. Now let me bounce back. Let me learn, and let's go at it again. Because like we said time and time again, we give it to men. So yeah, I'm glad we had this conversation.
No, I'm glad too, and I'm grateful for you all, and Rahel. Shout out to Rahel, who produces the show. And when we had this conversation about having the show and who we wanted to have on, it was very important for us to have voices and people who kind of represent, really get into the bottom of things, really get into the heart of the matter, the truths, and you know, sometimes on these shows, and this show in particular, sometimes we speak in pull quotes. You know the thing that you're gonna say that's gonna go viral, and it's fun, and there's room for that too. But we just felt in this time, with what's going on in this topic, there wasn't room for that. That we just needed the right guests to have this conversation with, who were going to speak the truth as they saw it. And I'm real grateful to have all of you on, and to have this conversation with you. And I hope it helps not only us, right, but I hope it helps the fans, and I hope it helps us go forward and how we reconcile with these things, and how we go on. So I appreciate
Definitely.
y'all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
No doubt. And y'all welcome back anytime for sure. And of course, to the fans, I appreciate y'all for watching. I'm a little afraid to get into the comments when we post this thing, but I'm gonna get into the comments with you guys. If we could have some real discussion, anybody who's watching, get into the comments. Let's have a real discussion and discourse about it. Want to hear from a genuine place. If you trolling, we just gonna ignore you anyway. So you're just wasting your Twitter fingers. All right. Thank y'all for watching For the Record. See you next week. Peace.